Welcome to the Insider Track. For the second time I've said that, because if you don't know, me and Jack have already done this and it didn't record. So we're going again, Jack. We're going again. Sorry, mate. Of course, Jack joins me and we're going to talk about all things Manchester United. They have got a takeover on the way. We don't know who's going to get that. Is it going to be Ratcliffe? Is it going to be the Qataris? We shall wait and see. But Jack, let's talk about Man United as they stand right now. Obviously, in summer, things could change. I'm going to make you talk about things that we've already discussed for the last 20 minutes.
You're getting a sense of deja vu already.
I know. We've already done this because some idiot didn't hit record. But who knows? Who knows who that was, right?
Yeah.
So let's start where we started last time, and that was at centre back for Man United. We'll look at outgoings, and then we can maybe discuss some incoming. So we spoke about Harry Maguire, and what we were saying is we expect that he's probably going to leave Manchester United. £70 million move there. It's not worked out, and he was the beaten stick, wasn't he, for a long time for the problems that they had.
Yeah, Harry Maguire was very much a personification of the slump that Man United had last season under Ralph Rangnick. He became the embodiment of it when there was actually numerous players who weren't performing well. And under Ten Hag, it hasn't gone to plan as well. Martinez and Varane are being chosen ahead of him, and I think it speaks even more volumes the fact that Luke Shaw is also chosen. Obviously, a left back, but who's chosen, who's been picked there ahead of Maguire. Ten Hag has done quite well in that. I feel when you drop a captain, it's going to be quite challenging. They could dismantle lots of things in the dressing room, or someone could get annoyed. But it seems on the outside, it looks quite amicable, and Harry Maguire lifted the Carabao Cup, I think, and it seemed quite calm. And I think perhaps speculatively, he's been given a bit of reassurance about the future. Probably, as you say, not at Man United. You'd imagine he'd be going off to another club.
Sorry to interrupt, just quickly to say thanks so much for watching. Hang around and make sure you subscribe, because tomorrow we've got a really, really interesting chat about how Manchester United could jump in to the race for Jude Bellingham. Thanks again, make sure you like and subscribe and enjoy the rest of the video. Cheerio.
You're saying that, you could see Harry Maguire being phenomenal in Serie A, couldn't you?
Like Chris Smalling at Roma. Yeah. Goes over there and just becomes one of their best players. Yeah, I mean, Roma would be an interesting one, certainly. But I think he's a player there because he does well for... I'm sure you follow England extensively, don't you? But he does very well for England.
The national side, of course, yes.
Yeah, of course, yeah. But he's brilliant for Gareth Southgate during our major tournaments and stuff. He's a really good player. And Gareth Southgate, I think he said recently... I wasn't actually recently. It was a month or so back, about how, of course... him not playing regularly for Man United is going to impact his England hopes. And I think for Maguire, for doing so well for England, and he's got to a final and semi-final and stuff and being integral, he's going to want to keep that going. So, certainly it'll be gone, imagined, in the summer.
And I'd probably an area Man United could probably strengthen again, actually, at centre-back. Phil Jones we were talking about him before, obviously 2023, he's set to leave the club. He's been there forever. The most famous thing is this picture, I think, of Phil Jones diving, isn't it, when he's trying to save the ball with his face, which I love in a defender, by the way. Adore that.
It's great. I love all that. I love it. Look at him go for it. Yeah, no, 100%. It is pretty crazy to think he's still there. And, because he was a Ferguson signing, I think. And Ferguson said he was the next, I'm paraphrasing a lot, but it was something like Phil Jones is the next best England central defender or something. But Ferguson also said Dele Alli was the next big thing. But, things like that don't go to plan. And unfortunately, even being relatively young, considering how long he's been around for, I think he must be 30 now, which is still, for a defender, you can still go.
31 years, yeah. 31.
He's 31, so still not getting game time. And, I presume it's not even going to be a Premier League club or a top 5 league that he dropped down to. It'd be Championship or something like that. Would be my guess.
Yeah, I think he's also been plagued with injuries as well. I think he's been unfortunate with injuries, and that's not helped him either. Victor Lindelof also out of coming into the last year of his deal in 2024, so that's another one that's got interest around him. But I don't see Manchester United having an exodus of defenders, because whoever they release, they have to replace. So we'll wait and see on that front. Yeah. Aaron Wan-Bissaka at right back has been wanted by a number of clubs. So our understanding that Ten Hag would probably happily let him go, because it's an area Man United want to strengthen. Jeremy Frimpong at Leverkusen, who was at Celtic, and then is a Man City youth product. That is correct. Yeah, it's a Man City youth product.
Yeah, no, he is. Yeah, it surprised me because I read something on him and it said like, oh, the former Man City defender. And I was like, what? What do you mean former Man City? And he was there, and it's just surprising that he's been sort of Premier League club, Scottish Premiership, and Bundesliga, and he's like 23 years old. He's just so young. I thought he'd be, I don't know, 31 or something for going around that much. But yeah, and now obviously linked back with a move to Man United, Dutch as well. You know, Ten Hag enjoys bringing Dutch players in. Tremendous right back. He'd be my pick, to be honest. But speaking of Dutch players, I think you're going to mention about Dumfries as well of Inter Milan. Would be a good pick. I don't know. Does he play centre back as well? Because that could be something.
He has done. He's dropped in, at times, but he's powerful, pacey, good going forward. I think in the World Cup, people seen him and thought, "Oh, this guy actually is really good." It was weird because he's been around Dumfries for a long time, but all of a sudden, people were like, "Ah, it's really good, him," which often happens at the World Cup, right? A player that's playing in a foreign league, suddenly everyone goes, "Oh, wow, he's really good." Well, there's good players in other leagues other than the Premier League as well. Funnily enough,
the World Cup is bizarre. In you have a star player for the World Cup, and it just inflames their reputation to such a huge extent that it must be a dream for agents and certain clubs when their player performs well, because clubs. The biggest example I can think of was El Hadji Diouf for Senegal, and this is going back a bit in 2002. And he was amazing. And Liverpool went in for him quite big money at the time. And that obviously didn't turn out too well, kind of thing. It didn't turn out to be all that.
Ended up at Rangers.
Yeah. Did he go Rangers, did he?
He ended up at Rangers, El Hadji Diouf. Yeah, ended up at Rangers. And let's just say he was a character when he was in Scotland as well, certainly.
Didn't he? Yeah, no, I'm not going to mention that actually. But I thought he got in trouble with, he had a little bit to do with a fan. But that was
he had it to do with everyone. Yeah, putting El Hadji Diouf into an Old Firm derby probably wasn't the wisest mix in history, to be fair.
Yeah, but it does. It inflames players. But I'm not saying that about Dumfries or anything like that. Like, there's been some.
A good example is Enzo Fernandez. Enzo Fernandez, obviously a tremendous talent, right?
Oh, yeah.
But there's a prime time to sell a player, and I think Enzo Fernandez, off the back of that World Cup, hit that prime time to be sold. And that's why that deal happened. Benfica knew, as the selling club in this instance, that he was at peak value at that point in January. It was like that. We're going to get the full release clause now, and summer we're probably not. So that's why that happened, because of the wave he was on, Jack, off the back of the World Cup.
And they played that perfectly as well, Benfica. They did that so well. No, it's not for sale. Release clause, they didn't bend, and they got the maximum value. Chelsea even having to pay in installments to get him. It could turn out to be worth money. You don't know. He seems a tremendous player. But Benfica did it. And as you say, that World Cup would have had them rubbing their hands with glee, I imagine, as well.
And that's where Denzel Dumfries is at. Stock's high. Man United like him, and Frimpong as well. And they will definitely strengthen the right back position. Obviously, Diogo Dalot's in there as well. Brandon Williams on the side, just a couple of side notes. Brandon Williams, one to watch out for. I think he could leave. He was on loan at Norwich last season. Isn't really getting game time. He's 22 years old. England's player who will be ready now to step up to a main role. But let's move into the centre of the park. We'll move on to the Scottish player in the team. Obviously, Matt means he's the best player in the team. That is Scott McTominay, who's been heavily liked by Newcastle, was looked at in January, Jack. Scott McTominay to Newcastle, Jack. You're the resident Newcastle fan on the chat, so go for it.
Yeah, Scott McTominay. I read the piece on social media, and as you do when you read things, the headlines, you just go, I get annoyed and stuff. And I was like, Scott McTominay. But I read it. I read the Telegraph piece about the links, and we did there give a bit of detail about why Newcastle like him, and also the fact that he's been green-lighted by all three contingents of the recruitment side, being that Eddie Howe, Dan Ashworth, and Chief of Recruitment Steve Nixon. They all want him. They see him as someone who can develop, who can be moulded by Howe. He has a physicality. He's Premier League proven. And also what I liked about it as well is they see him as we play 4-3-3 as the number 6, and putting Guimaraes further forward in them advanced positions, which I prefer. I prefer someone to be there so Guimaraes can get those goals. You notice he hasn't scored as many recently and stuff because he's been dropped back a little bit playing that number 6 role. So yeah, having him in would be okay. It's sort of money dependent. I think 40 million or something was quoted, and I thought maybe that can go for someone else, but I suppose in a sense, Newcastle haven't let us down in terms of who they've brought in. Really, the only thing
It's
I'd
been
say,
very good, hasn't it, so far?
yeah, it's been tremendous, and Eddie Howe developing players, even just moving them to a different area. Look at like Joe Linton and stuff. It's just moved to a different part of the pitch entirely and just blossomed. And yeah, Fabian Schär was like out of sorts under Steve Bruce, and now he's one of our second most important centre back, or first, whatever one you want to choose. So there is that, but it's a premium, and I do fear maybe Man United will be a bit reluctant to sell to Newcastle, I suppose.
Yeah, there is that kind of fear actually that Premier League clubs don't want to play ball with Newcastle United because they are a direct rival. But I think if Manchester United get the Qatari takeover, that might change things a little bit. Also interesting, Manchester United in their midfield don't actually have a player apart from Sabitzer, but that's a loan obviously, who is literally out of their contract. So they're all until 2024 or above. So Man United don't have anyone who's just walking out the door for free, and that, as much as selling players is good financially, sometimes so is the fact that this guy who we'd probably struggle to get rid of can actually just go. So they've not got that option as well. So McTominay could be one to help them bring some funds in to help the middle of the park. So there's some murmurs that could become a permanent deal. I would be surprised if Man United did that, but we'll wait and see on that front. I mean, he could be a bit part for them. Eriksen's obviously been injured a lot. McTominay could go, and we'll touch on another player who could come in shortly. They're absolutely fine in the wings. We've spoken about that before. Let's talk about Alanga, though. Dortmund liked him, Jack, didn't they? And he's someone who could go out on loan. Where do you see Alanga going? He's only 20 years old. He's played in the Premier League. He's played in Europe.
He has proven under Rangnick that he can perform very well in the Premier League. He can score goals, but obviously under Ten Hag, the system's changed or something's changed, and he doesn't seem to have a future. There were tons of links with clubs over January, the strongest link being Dortmund, which I was quite surprised about. Everton were amongst it as well. I think maybe even Leeds, but he obviously ended up staying. Doesn't seem like he has much of a future there, but I think you said before about perhaps there being a sort of Man United will look to sell, but maybe not outright. They want to hedge the bets and maybe get a buyback clause or something like that. If they do, or loan him or something like that, which would make a lot of sense, because if the potential's there, you want to cover all your tracks, don't you?
Yeah, and I think the centre of the park, like I said, is somewhere Man United will strengthen. They're fine on the wings. They've got this guy called Rashford. I don't know if you've heard of him. He's pretty good.
I have heard of Rashford, yeah.
Yeah, he's doing all right. Obviously, Antony came in for a lot of money as well. There's some criticism of him a little bit, but I think he's shown what he could be. I think he's been bought for that reason. Then they've got Garnacho, who's come in as well, been fantastic. Sancho's still there, and his future is pretty secure at Manchester United, despite perhaps people thinking that it isn't. I think he's had a lot going on personally, and I think that's what has maybe stopped him moving forward.
Yeah.
I think the key area, Jack, for Manchester United in summer is, as it has been really for what it feels like for like about 5 summers, is going to be that attacking position. So yeah, let's talk about up front. It's going to be the main position. Like we said, Manchester United seem to have been missing a star striker for a long time. They obviously have Martial there, who was on loan at Sevilla, didn't work out. There's a whole Mason Greenwood situation, which we're obviously not going to go into. And then Wout Weghorst is there. We'll see if that is something that becomes a permanent deal. Wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah, I don't know. I can't see him being a permanent deal there. It's the strangest transfer I've ever seen in my life. And you look at his stats now, and he was almost like this polar opposite of Ronaldo's stats about the pressing and stuff. But I suppose Ten Hag didn't have much to go on, and that's why he's gone for Weghorst. But I can't see anything past this summer.
See, I'm the opposite. It wouldn't surprise me for Manchester United to make that permanent, simply because of Martial's situation. I think he will likely go.
Yeah,
I think obviously the Greenwood situation the club are in will need to make a decision on that, and then that will leave them really with quite short up front. They obviously lost Cavani last summer, etc. So they really do need 2 or 3 strikers in your team if you're going to be competing at the top. And Weghorst does offer that something different, even if it's just to be a disruptor up front that's big and strong and annoys centre backs. He's kind of got that about him, doesn't he? So maybe that would be a reason to keep him. But we do know Manchester United like Harry Kane. They've always liked Harry Kane. However, perhaps in years gone by, they weren't in a position under the Glazers to invest 100+ million it would have cost then to bring in Harry Kane. However, under ownership, under the Qataris or Sir Jim, whoever takes it in, we do think that will become more and more of a possibility. My understanding is Harry Kane would now be set for a move and happy to go. Contract expiring in 2024. Spurs have offered him or are trying to offer him something new. And I think their manager situation, we can talk about Conte, Jack, if you want to comment on it as well. We'll play it. I think, honestly, Spurs could hire a manager that keeps Kane there. I do think he would dictate who gets a job at Tottenham in a way. Does Pochettino keep Kane at Spurs? That kind of thing.
I mean, that's a good one. I was just thinking, and there's no way that would happen because, Kane's done this before where new managers come in, all right, under this manager, he's going to flourish, or under this new manager, they're going to get silverware. But the bringing Pochettino back, that could do something perhaps. But just on Conte and the press conference, obviously big news. There seems to be rumblings that he's basically out the door. It's not confirmed as such, but it seems to be that Spurs are readying him to go. I'm not sure what the delay is, but I don't know. I guess the payoff, I'm not sure. But essentially throwing himself on, just sort of basically making his position untenable deliberately as to get sacked. I'm not going to be as cynical as to say I was to get the payoff, but certainly to remove himself from the position. He's been around the block long enough to know to say that kind of thing is going to get him out the door. It's going to make him not viable to continue there. What he said can be true, and you can argue that it is true, and it is true. Spurs should be doing better. They should be putting more money. Daniel Levy has his shortcomings, but Conte wasn't the man to do that or to say that. I don't feel. I think he's done it for selfish reasons, and I'm really quite irked about him throwing the players under the bus because this is a man who's been linked with moving or leaving or not signing a contract from Spurs. He has not shown that club commitment in the slightest. And he's done well there. I don't think he's done bad at all. He's accrued the fourth most points out of the entire Premier League or something since he's been there in November of last year or wherever it was. But to throw your players under the bus so they're not committed and stuff, when you yourself have not been committed or shown any ounce of wanting to stay, how can they? How can they're looking up to you as a manager and you're not even committing to the cause and then you're throwing them under the bus? So he's not blameless in the slightest.
Yeah, but he also is heavily linked to a return to Italy. Inter Milan very like him a lot. It's not going too well for Zanetti there, and we're expecting him to leave in the summer. Inter Milan could bring him back. He's not signed that deal, as you said, Jack. His contract expires in the summer, so when people are saying, he's getting the payoff isn't massive in terms of contract payoffs. It's not big. His contract expires literally in 3 months' time or less. So, I mean, there's that as well. So, there is that part to it. I think maybe Harry Kane perhaps would argue that you can't say I'm not committed to Tottenham because Harry Kane has gone trophyless, really. Well, he has, hasn't he? Because of the fact he's not moved. And that's the guy that really, with his quality, should have won the Premier League by now, the Champions League, etc., etc. Like I said, Man United still like him. I think that's really possible this summer for around £90 million, something around that mark. You're guaranteed goals, guaranteed Premier League goals with Harry Kane. You think in a squad with Manchester United quality, he would be tremendous. They do like Victor Osimhen at Napoli, but I think the bidding war that is starting to look set to take place for him, Chelsea want him, PSG really like him, Chelsea really want him. Would Man United get dragged into that? Maybe if they have the Qatari money coming in, perhaps they go, well, we'll outbid you. But I don't, if FFPL comes into play, they've got other areas to strengthen. I think the £130 million it will take to get Osimhen out of Napoli might be a put-off for Manchester United, Jack, and maybe they fall back onto Harry Kane, who's kind of the steady and guaranteed goals, perhaps.
I think that's a good argument. I would say perhaps Osimhen maybe would be more conducive to Ten Hag's style of being on the front foot, closing down stuff. But yeah, and it comes at a cheaper rate. Harry Kane's a guarantee of goals. I'm not saying with Osimhen there's a risk, but there's less risk of Harry Kane. He's going to come in and he's just going to be on fire. He's going to get you 30 goals in all competitions. And particularly, having Sancho there, Bruno Fernandes, having that the supply that he's going to get, that could be even more so. So it is quite a good idea if they get him. I think people are a bit concerned about his age. But, strikers these days, you look at Lewandowski, 35, pushing 35. I'm sure I'm in the same thing. And, so he's still banging the goals in for Barcelona and that. So that kind of position as a number 9, you don't have to be, go running in behind and stuff. And it doesn't seem to be Man United's way. They did that a lot under Ollie, running in behind, a lot of counter-attacking, but it's not the way of Ten Hag. So yeah, Harry Kane, I'm sure he'd be interested, but I think maybe he'd have a bit of loyalty to Spurs, and maybe in that sense to be a nagging bit with like, do I want to go to a Premier League rival with, say, like Bayern Munich come along, and there's probably more guarantee of trophies at Bayern Munich at this stage, given their dominance in, I know they're second in the Bundesliga at the moment, but I think they've won it 7 times in a row or something, so there'd be that. But yeah, no, I feel, it makes a lot of sense for Man United to do it, but Daniel Levy will certainly inflame the price for them. If they put a bid in, then he's not going to want to sell to Man United. He's going to want to sell to a foreign rival out of anyone.
Yeah, and with Kane this last year, I think that's where Kane and his team would use leverage to try and get a deal done to get him out. Real Madrid have looked at him before and liked him, but obviously Benzema's committing his future to Real Madrid, and Karim Benzema's not exactly a striker, so maybe Kane won't go there because he knows he has to compete. And Man United have shown as well that they will not just buy young, they will buy players who have the experience. Casemiro obviously is the epitome of that season. Interestingly, Osimhen and Kane both have 21 league goals this season, one in Serie A and one in England, although Osimhen has done it in 5 less games than Harry Kane, and it's just been absolutely ridiculous for Napoli. But I do think you're right. I do think Man United at this point in time, as things stand, will likely go more Kane than Osimhen. Also, what's interesting to note is the English homegrown status. These things all come into play as well for Europe. But if both of them don't happen, and Manchester United perhaps think we'll spend a little bit less, Goncalo Ramos at Benfica is one to watch as well. 16 league goals this season in Portugal. Obviously, the other night in the Champions League was part of the Benfica team that absolutely smashed their way through to the next round, which obviously lost Scott Parker's job as well at Bruges. So Goncalo Ramos is another option. Look, this is the guy that came on for Ronaldo, if you remember, in the World Cup. Nobody knows who I'm talking about. Ronaldo was dropped, and everyone went, "Oh my goodness!" And Ramos came in and scored a hat trick.
Yeah.
If you remember.
Yeah. He was.
I mean, that's maybe a 21-year-old Jack. 5 caps for Portugal, 4 goals, 16 league goals this season. Clearly, an amazing talent.
I think with him, he was linked to Newcastle last season. It was strange, actually, the league, because they had like a Portuguese reporter on Sky Sports being interviewed, and I think he said at the time, "Oh yeah, I think he'll go somewhere like Newcastle." Then everyone was aggregating it like a bid's been accepted and stuff like this, and people going mad about Ramos. And I'm sure they'd like him, like a lot of teams like him, but there was nothing in that. I heard from Portugal at the time that there was an expectancy that, wait for it, Wolves were going to get him, but obviously now, since the World Cup and stuff, that's got bigger. I'd say with the thing with Benfica, if we're looking at the last sort of couple of years, the selling one big name. And the trouble that people may find with Fernandes is gone this year. They have Antonio Silva, the young centre-back, who could be 100 million. Now, are they going to want to sell Ramos as well as that? It's a lot of selling. It'd be like doing what Ajax did. And I look at the trouble they're in this season after selling their manager, best defender, best midfielder, best defender, all in the same window for lots of money. But now there's been struggling. They've had sackings and stuff. So anyway, Benfica with that, it will be cheaper than Kane. But I think a lot will correspond with, like, say, how Antonio Silva does. There was, I don't want to mention this name. I want to mention this name, Benjamin Sesko, who is at RB Salzburg.
Yeah, we've reported that ourselves, Jack, as well. Yeah,
he's at Salzburg now, but he's moving to Leipzig, and I don't know if there'd be anything but there have been links. I'm trying to work out how, if he's going to Leipzig this window, how can they interject?
Well, there's a condition in Sesko's deal that if someone can beat the fee paid, it's basically it relinquishes the option to buy, kind of thing. So
that makes much more sense.
Yeah, that's the link in the deal that we put out. Man United are still interested in him, and we got the same thing. How on earth can that be possible? Because that's the same for a lot of these deals, by the way. Players agree, and then there's always just something there. Because an agent knows that if you agree a deal so far in advance and your player has a fantastic 6 months, then suddenly their stock rises, and you could have a Man United come in for you instead of going to Leipzig, or So that's the kind of thing that's in place. Sesko is an interesting one as well. I think he's not ready enough to be United's number 9 yet, and I think they'll see him as that. Man United need someone to come in. They need a number 9 to come in. At the end of the day, Ronaldo was the guy you would have expected to have been there for a period of time, scoring a goals at least 2 more seasons. He's obviously found himself in his situation. Piers Morgan helped him get out of the club, and now he's not there. So Yeah, I think Ramos is one to watch. Silva's phenomenal, the centre back though that you're talking about. He's something else, isn't he? He's tremendous. But what I will say about Benfica is they're a selling club, Jack. They are a club that have youngsters that they then sell for profit. That's what they do, and they're a club that aren't massively financially comfortable. So if someone comes in within 70, 80 for Ramos, is that enough to turn their hand? I think it's interesting.
Yeah,
I think
I'd be very surprised if they were like, no to that. I get you. And they also weigh into the fact that I'm not sure if he's a Mendes player. I think he might be Ramos. No, he's not. I don't think he is. I haven't checked. Anyway, but the Mendes comes into the equation a lot because he
George Mendes. Yeah.
Oh yeah, sorry, Mendes. He yields a lot of power there. So like you're think about the money that guy's made that club recently over the past sort of 5-10 years, and it's so much, and they don't want to disrupt him. I'm not saying he has the last say, but I'm saying if he wants one of his clients to make the move and he pushes for a bid to be accepted from a rival club to bring that player over, I feel Benfica do listen to him a fair bit about what they do.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, for sure. And like I've said before, I think they got a lot of stick during the Enzo Fernandez deal. I mean, Chelsea fans basically saying, "Why won't you just sell us him?" Which is fair enough when you want the player, but they're just getting their money's worth. So it's a bit like we spoke before. We talked about Osimhen before, I think, me and you, Jack, about how you've not dealt with Napoli yet. It was actually, we were talking about Kvaratskhelia. That's who we were talking about. And, Napoli are the same kind of outfit in terms of they don't just sell. They sell for the club's worth. And I think Benfica will be the same. They'll push you up to that 80, 90 as high as they can get for Ramos up front. And 21 years old, though, that might be the reason to pay that, because you're going to pay that for Kane at 29. Suppose what you're getting for Kane at 29 is a guarantee goals. Rather with Ramos, there's still that kind of air of uncertainty being so young.
Yeah, for sure. There's always an element of risk when there's a player coming from abroad and they're so young. But I say with Kane, he's been doing it for like the past decade, just getting so many goals. With Ramos, I feel like, that could happen, I suppose, if Man United made a big enough offer for him in the summer, and Benfica, I'm sure they'd perk up. But again, it could just be, are Man United going to want to appease Ten Hag and, put all their eggs in one basket because they want that marquee signing? And as you say, maybe Ramos poses a bit more of a risk in that regards because of his age and the fact he's playing in the Portuguese league, Liga Premier. Darwin Núñez was a big one that came from Liverpool last season from the same club, and he's grown into it, but it's taken some time. And there have been some games where you're thinking, have they overpaid for this player? So and you maybe want someone to hit the ground running as well. So that could be something.
That's all things Manchester United, Jack, and I'm sure it's going to be a changing situation because of the ownership situation. So we'll probably come back at some point and talk about this. I think Harry Kane is absolutely going to be one to watch out for Manchester United as his time at Tottenham up, because it looks like Conte's is, but it's going to be really interesting to see. Does Scott McTominay, the great Scottish Scott McTominay, end up at Jack's Newcastle United? That's looking like it could happen too. Wan-Bissaka could leave. Man United would also bring in a central midfielder, another central defender, and then the right backs with Frimpong and Dumfries being liked by Manchester United. It's going to be busy. It's going to be really busy. It's going to be a huge summer, which is quite mad to think of the January we've just had. But it's going to be a huge summer. So, Jack, thanks again for coming on the Inside the Track again, mate. And I always enjoy talking to you. And next time I'll make sure I record the first time so you don't have to have two conversations.
Cheers.